My work starts in 1980 when I formed a group of performers with whom I created public events in many different kinds of venues, such as beaches, public squares, and even theaters. So with this group, in the context of performance on the beach, say on the beach of Ipanema, I started to use a lot of different materials. I started to use graffiti, visual poems. I started to use different kinds of elements as tools in my performance. And that led to a relentless experimentation with a wide array of materials, photocopiers, rubber stamping. And I felt that although that was a very important phase, that had not pushed the possibilities of poetry beyond the formal limits that I had inherited from other styles and groups and movements before. So in order to create a poetic language that was visual, but at the same time would, I felt, correspond more readily to the transformations, to the social transformations that were taking place internationally, with the global networks starting to emerge, with a sense of immateriality becoming a viable form of thinking, art making, and writing, I then created holographic poetry, which relies not on the physicality of the word on the page, but relies on the question of what happens to language when you can still control it, but you're working in a immaterial medium that is based not on the graphic substance of language, but on light, on photons, on the multiplicity of points of views, on a syntax of dissolving forms. This piece is a dialogue between a bird and a plant. A bird in a cage sings. The sound travels to a gallery about 400 miles away, and the plant can hear the singing of the bird. An electrode attached to the plant activates a computer which is controlling the sounds that are being produced and transmitted back to the bird cage. So the bird can hear the sounds produced by the plant, and a form of interspecies communication unfolds through the network. Teleporting an unknown state creates the experience of the internet as a means of distributing natural resources where these are more needed. The basic idea is to invite participants on the internet to point their cameras to the sky and as a result teleport photons into a remote gallery where a seed has been planted in a completely dark room. So as the light comes in from different parts of the globe, then the seed can do photosynthesis and grow in total darkness with light from all over the world.
C'est une œuvre de téléprésence et on met en relation le hic et nunc de l'endroit où je suis, mon ciel à moi, que j'envoie dans un lieu autre et qui va permettre à une plante de pousser. Ce qui est complètement fabuleux dans cette chose-là, c'est nous mettre face à la responsabilité collective que l'on a face aux vivants. En l'occurrence, là, il s'agissait d'une toute petite plante fragile, mais est-ce qu'on la prend? Comment elle la prend? Qu'est-ce que la lumière? La lumière, c'est aussi cette source de vie. Internet et les nouvelles technologies, c'est de la lumière qui se transporte.
It is this collective participation. It is this reversal of the topology of broadcasting, where you have the information going from one to many. Here you have the information going from many to one. The understanding of how network topology informs how meaning is constructed and undoing it to reverse it, to converge it to literally a point to enable life to sprout.
Je crois que ce qui est important dans les travaux d'Eduardo Kac, c'est que c'est jamais des travaux simples et qui ont une approche littérale. C'est-à-dire que les œuvres de téléprésence, bien sûr, mettent en jeu la téléprésence, mais il y a toujours quelque chose en plus, il y a toujours quelque chose d'autre, et ce quelque chose d'autre appartient à la communication.
This piece is about the problem of exoticism. The piece invites the participant to put on a headset and transport himself or herself to the body of the exotic bird. What's interesting is that in that case, when you find yourself in the body of the so-called exotic bird, then you're seeing yourself. You're seeing yourself outside the cage. Your perspective is imprisoned in the cage, but your body is then outside the cage. So you're inside and outside at the same time. The installation basically had a VR headset outside the cage in this very large aviary with a robotic bird inside, and this robotic bird was sharing the environment with 30 small birds. So a sense of contrast, the uniqueness of the so-called exotic bird was very strong, because the robotic bird was big, there was one, it was big, and it was red. And the other birds were very small, there were 30 of them, and they were very gray. And this was on the internet, so everything that the person wearing the headset was seeing was online, and people online were speaking, and the sound was coming through the body of the macaw, mixing with the singing of the birds, going back online, and there was this form of interaction that was distributed.
People can listen to this conversation at the same time. Is it only like point to point, or everybody that's shown on screen?
There's too many people, that's what it is.
Doug, are you there?
Donc on était à la fois dans l'expérience vécue, il y avait à la fois un sentiment très fort d'être dans l'endroit dans lequel on était, l'endroit depuis lequel on se téléportait d'une certaine façon à Atlanta, cette présence très forte, contrainte par le corps du télérobot à Atlanta, et aussi ce choix de se révéler aux autres en décidant de parler ou de ne pas parler, donc de communiquer ou de ne pas communiquer.
For me, to draw attention to exactly what happens as a signal flows through a network, and to use it in a way that it produces meaning in the work, is very important. The sense of displacement, of taking you out of a comfortable, familiar, human frame of mind temporarily in the context of the work, and giving you another perspective, a perspective other than the one you're accustomed to, can shed light on our role, the role of humans in general, but our specific role in the environment we live as well.
Vamos voltar à Casa das Rosas, onde o artista Eduardo Kac está implantando um chip no tornozelo. Como é que está andando a coisa aí, Celso Catelli? Boa noite.
Bom, o processo começa aqui na Casa das Rosas. Luciana Bonafé, eu estou ao lado. O Eduardo está fazendo a incisão e eu estou ao lado.
Time capsule is, the piece is based on a microchip, which is about 2 millimeters wide and 15 millimeters long. It's a small microchip that I inserted in my ankle, live on television, and also live as a netcast, and enabling myself to be read the information, this 9-digit that is encoded in the microchip, to be read live on the internet.
Do médico Paulo Gouveia, que vai explicar o que está sendo feito. Dr. Paulo?
Agora ele está rompendo a pele, vai percorrer com a agulha paralelamente à parte superior da pele, vai percorrer num ângulo paralelo a essa pele, vai introduzir totalmente a agulha no tecido subcutâneo. Aí, ao final do término da inserção da agulha, ele vai segurar, vai apertar, aí vai fazer a introdução do chip através de um mandril que corre por dentro da agulha. Aí, terminado, que isso que ele terminou de fazer agora ele vai
In a lot of respects, the body has been one of the last frontiers of invasion of technology, except for probably medical uses such as intra-body microchips, etc. Now in Time Capsule, Eduardo actually turns the body into a wet host for artificial memory. And the status of memory, I believe, in the digital age has very much changed. Memory used to be, or the body used to be a site of human-only memory, and Time Capsule turns it into a host for artificial memory in various respects.
The body, in that case, became quite literally a node on the network where information would come through, the signal asking for the retrieval data comes into my body, and then it's fired out of my body back into the internet. And that information was then recorded on a database. So you have a sense not only of the body as a network node, but you also have the incredibly dangerous notion that information, memory stored within your body becomes retrievable from the outside.
Time Capsule crosses a lot of boundaries here with having artificial memory as part of the body, with making your personal memory public on a lot of levels. And that way it also touches on a lot of ethical dilemmas we're facing today.
Et moi, ce qui m'intéresse beaucoup dans cette œuvre, c'est précisément qu'Eduardo Kac prend en compte ce que nous sommes, non seulement en tant qu'êtres humains, mais aussi en tant qu'animaux. Et en enregistrant ce numéro dans une banque de données, il déclare d'une certaine façon que l'être humain Eduardo Kac est propriétaire de l'animal Eduardo Kac.
It is important to point out that the implant is one element of the work. Here in the gallery, we also see 7 family photographs shot in the 30s. For me, these photographs are time capsules, memories of actual experiences that were captured and preserved in time. These 7 sepia-tone photographs are some of the very few belongings my grandmother managed to bring with her when she fled Poland in 1939. I grew up looking at these images, which are as much a part of me as the microchip is now. The microchip is still in my ankle, and it will be until I die. As any time capsule, it's buried under a surface, and in this case, under my skin. Uirapuru is the name of a real Amazonian bird, but it's also the name of a myth. And the myth of Uirapuru is directly connected to the behavior of this real bird. The Uirapuru bird has the most beautiful song of any bird anywhere. And as a result, the myth says that when Uirapuru sings in the Amazon forest, all the other birds stop singing to listen to it. There are many versions of this myth. Different tribes created their own versions. Different composers created their own versions of the myth for their compositions. So this piece, Uirapuru, this artwork, Uirapuru, is my own version of the myth. And in my version of the myth, Uirapuru is a flying fish that hovers above the forest and hosts the spirits of those who are far away. In the actual installation, you have a small forest that is created in the space, and you have to choose your path. You can go to the left or to the right originally. And when you choose a path, you encounter first either the telepresence station or the VRML station, the network multi-user manifestation. And basically what happens is that if you go to the left, you gain control of this flying fish. You grab a small fish with your hand and you move it, and then the robotic fish flies above the canopy, mimicking your gestures. And whatever you do, the perspective of the flying fish is transmitted immediately to the internet. The sounds in the room, which are sounds of real Amazonian birds singing in the room, through the body of robotic birds, are also transmitted through to the internet. And when you go to the other side, you find yourself in a virtual world. And this world is connected to the internet. People can come online and move around that space and interact in many different ways. And you have your own representation in that space. You have your own avatar in that space. And so does the Urapuru flying above the canopy and everyone that comes and participates. The robotic birds in the room, they send a command to a computer in the Amazon, an actual computer in the Amazon. And depending on how long it takes for the signal to come back, then those birds will sing more often or less often as an indication of how busy, the pulse, the rhythm of the internet, how busy the internet is at that moment. So you have the signal traveling from Tokyo to the Amazon and coming back. You have quite literally something that is physically connected to the Amazon through the network. You have a sense of global action expressed in the room, surrounding you as an acoustic and visual manifestation.
La vraie difficulté dans la téléprésence, donc cette présence à distance, c'est effectivement pour le public avoir ce sentiment incroyable, inouï, d'être présent, d'être là, ailleurs, et d'expérimenter deux endroits, deux univers simultanément.
Urapuru merges virtual reality, telepresence, and networking into a seamless form of experience. I believe that this is going to be a predominant form of experience in the future, where distributed virtual environments will affect physically other environments, and what happens in these physical environments will affect these distributed virtual environments. But in the case of Urapuru, the desire is to give a sense of mythology, a sense of mythopoetics to the internet, to create a sense of marvel, of wonder, as a result of this distributed sense of cognition and participation. Genesis investigates the relationship between the field of the biological sciences, belief systems, ethics, and distributed participation on the internet. How these become intertwined as biotechnology acquires a predominant role in society at large. In Genesis, I took a sentence from the book of Genesis, from the Bible, a sentence that says, as God talks to men, "Let men have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the fowl of the air, and over everything that moves upon the earth." I converted this sentence to Morse code, and I created my own code according to which I am able to go from the binary code of Morse into genetic code. And the result of that was a gene that I crafted with 360 bases. This gene, together with another sequence that enables bacteria to glow with a blue light, was then inserted into a colony of clones, which shared a petri dish with another colony of clones that fluoresces in yellow. And through a process of natural mutation, bacterial communication, and mutation induced on the internet, the original meaning of the Word of God was changed anonymously through distributed participation. participants on the internet could activate a UV light box, an ultraviolet light box in the gallery, and the Petri dish was sitting right on top of it. So when this light box would light up, then the impact, the energy impact of the ultraviolet light changed the actual genetic structure of the bacteria. And as a result, it changed the meaning of the original biblical sentence in the body of the bacteria.
A frase da Bíblia que foi utilizada pelo Kac como uma espécie de fonte para, a partir dela, produzir um gene sintético ou artificial, ela parece autorizar o homem a produzir mutações no próprio ser vivo, a intervir sobre os outros seres vivos, inclusive sobre ele próprio. Mas eu acho que essa citação que faz o Eduardo Kac desse trecho do Gênesis tem também um sentido irônico. Eu acredito que o Kac, no fundo, ele está colocando em discussão essa sentença bíblica, porque a Bíblia simplesmente diz: vá e modifique e seja senhor de todas as coisas. O que eu acredito que a obra do Kac faz é o contrário. Ela coloca para o ser humano a responsabilidade diante dos outros seres vivos.
When we talk about genetic engineering, there is a general assumption, as we say in the United States, genes are us, that genes contain all the information about everything that we represent. And I call this genetic determinism, the idea that genes contain information about who you are emotionally, who you are intellectually, who you are health-wise, who you are in every aspect of your being. So artists are in a unique position to contribute a very different notion that is not based on statistical analysis, that is not based on very pragmatic research. Artists, because they operate with a different level of freedom, they can contribute a very alternative view, one that is not based on reductionism and one that offers a critical understanding of the practices of science. There are three possible scenarios in regards to the idea of bacterial communication. So the bacteria that have the Genesis gene, they might either keep it, lose it, or exchange it. And the mutation might still preserve the color but change the meaning. So the original Bible sentence, that moment when God talks to man and gives total power, might become garbage. It may be just nothing. We don't know. Who knows? Maybe a new word comes up. And what would that word be?
E o que acontece com a sentença bíblica? Aquela autorização que Deus deu ao homem para intervir sobre todas as formas vivas, ela é pervertida, ela é modificada. É como se fosse uma resposta da natureza à própria autoridade divina. A natureza, ela como se opõe a essa autorização e ela desmonta aquela sentença bíblica original.
After the show, the bacteria were then brought back to the laboratory and the genetic makeup was extracted and translated back to English, and the resulting sentence was posted on the internet. GIF-PK9 is my ongoing project, and the basic idea is to create a transgenic dog that would be part of my family. This dog would have genetic material from the Pacific Northeast jellyfish, which would allow it to glow with a green, lively color. This dog would glow in the dark, and it would be integrated into social life.
A gente tem que considerar que a partir do momento em que você cria uma obra viva, você cria um ser vivo ou você modifica um ser vivo, você não está lidando mais com matéria inanimada. Se você cria um cachorro geneticamente alterado, esse cachorro merece o nosso amor tanto quanto os outros cachorros. Ou seja, ele tem eticamente tanta necessidade de espaço vivo quanto os outros.
Alors que quand on se pose la question, je vais modifier le patrimoine génétique de ce chien et en plus le modifier en l'hybridant à une autre espèce animale, pour le mettre dans ma famille, quel statut, quelle relation je donne à cet animal et quel statut je me donne à moi.
I'm not interested in creating genetic art objects, so the dog is not the object, the art object, the thing that is being created. What's being created is a transgenic social subject. What's being created is a dog that is happy, that is healthy, that is part of society, that is part of my life, that is part of my family, and that would be playing with the kids in the neighborhood, to be taken for a walk. It would be an integral part of our society. The main gesture is a social one. The main gesture is one of creation of the dog, taking responsibility for that gesture, and social integration.
Historicamente, o pensamento humano ficou muito marcado pela distinção entre o natural e o artificial. Nós sempre acreditamos que o natural era o valor e o artificial era o mal. Esse tipo de dicotomia que separa um lado bom e um lado mal, o lado correto e o lado errado, é algo que tende a ser, de alguma forma, superado com essas novas propostas de Eduardo Kac.
I have made substantial progress with the GFP-K9 project in the sense that I have identified a company that can actually carry out the project. I have learned recently that there is a very specific promoter that would allow me to express the green fluorescent protein only at the level of the fur, at the coat of the skin of the dog, with more control as a result. And I'm looking forward to the day when GFP-K9 will be barking in my living room.
Le lien entre les œuvres d'Eduardo, des performances sur les plages de Rio, en passant par l'holopoésie, puis la téléprésence, en allant ensuite à la biotélématique et ensuite aux œuvres transgéniques, n'est pas une évolution d'utilisation de la technologie. Le fil conducteur, c'est, me semble-t-il, la communication, ou plutôt dépasser le problème de la communication pour aller au-delà.
From day one, the key element for me has been the question of communication, the understanding of how important communication is for everything, not just at the level of ordinary life, not just at the level of our use of specific tools, the telephone, radio, television, but at the philosophic level, how the idea of communication, not understood necessarily as the exchange of symbols, or the transmission of information, but thinking communication more at the level of placing things in contact, bringing together into a consensual domain things that might at first be perceived to be distinct, separate.
I think that Eduardo's work in a lot of respects changes the notion of art. Whenever you are using digital technologies, basically you are enabling a process. You become a mediatory agent rather than the creator of the work. Many of Eduardo's artworks are actually created by the public.
I'm interested in creating works that quite literally give us the experience of a new kind of ecology, an ecology in which we learn to reconcile the metaphysical propensity of virtual space with the phenomenology of telepresence. We learn to reconcile the work in a digital environment with the pleasure and the possibilities of being in a natural space.
What distinguishes him from many other artists, I think, is that he actually uses his body as a site in many works, and this is something the art audience or art world is still very skeptic about.
I'm not interested in working with standard modes of interface between humans and machines. I'm interested in creating the bacteria, plant, bird, mammal, reptile interface.
Pela primeira vez na história da humanidade, o artista se defronta com um desafio inteiramente novo, que é trabalhar com o próprio ser vivo. É produzir obras de arte vivas, é intervir sobre o próprio processo de vida. É criar uma obra tão radical que no fundo significa produzir uma mutação no humano tão profunda que essa obra, num certo sentido, ela se torna eterna, porque ela será reproduzida em todas as gerações posteriores. É um salto como nunca houve dentro da história da arte. Acho que nós estamos tão próximos dessa mutação, dessa revolução, que não nos damos conta do que está acontecendo hoje dentro do campo da arte. Eu acredito que a revolução que está sendo imprimida pelo Eduardo Kac é uma coisa tão profunda quanto, por exemplo, a descoberta da perspectiva no Renascimento ou a colocação do urinol dentro do museu pelo Marcel Duchamp. Quer dizer, é um salto qualitativo dentro do próprio conceito de arte.